Good morning, everyone. As you find your way into the ballroom this morning, we've got a wonderful panel set up for everyone. We have a panel here with some of our amazing young adults with PKU. And I will say this is the third conference, I believe, where we have done this panel. And we've previously done it on Sunday. And we had such great feedback from folks about this panel and wanting to hear from our young adults that we've moved it to Saturday so that everyone has a chance to listen to the panel. We're starting a couple of minutes late, but that's okay. It's an early morning for some of us. So we'll get started this morning. I'd like to have our panelists give you just a real quick introduction, who they are and where they're from, and we'll get started. Madison, do you want to start?
Sure. You want me to answer the first question?
No, just tell us who you are and where you're from.
Okay. My name is Madison Camp. I'm from Douglasville, Georgia, and I'm starting college this fall. So.
Yes, and Madison is one of the Guthrie Koch Scholarship winners, so congratulations on that. And I understand we have another Guthrie Koch Scholarship winner here at the conference. Bethany LaPrade is also here somewhere. So congratulations to those two young ladies.
Hi, I'm Preston Miller. I'm from Loganville, Georgia, but I currently live and work in Atlanta. I graduated in 2017 from Emory, and I have classical PKU.
Great. Awesome. Hey everyone, my name's Annie Berry. I am originally from Bakersfield, California. I went to University of Georgia for my undergrad because I wanted to do something different. Go Dogs! And I did my master's in dietetic internship at Georgia State University, and now I am living in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm a clinical dietitian there.
Dr. Ronnie Singh, who's with the clinic here in Emory, is going to join us as well. But we know you really want to hear from the adults, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So what we've done is put together just some questions that folks usually want to hear an answer to. But we have put on everyone's table a notepad and a pencil or a pen. If you have a question, you're welcome to write it down, and Michelle here is happy to gather them. We're trying to save a few minutes at the end for some Q&A. And we'll also have a microphone if you have a question that just pops in your head at the end. But let's start with our opening question. And I'm just going to throw out a question, and whoever wants to answer it is welcome to weigh in. And our first question is, what is the biggest challenge of living with PKU, and how do you deal with that challenge?
I'll start. So I think this differs from person to person, so I think we'll hear feedback from all of us on this one. For me, it is the pressure to break your diet in certain situations, usually not within the house, but in social settings. So whether it be work or school, or a party or anything like that. Not necessarily pressure from your friends. Oh yeah, of course. The not necessarily pressure from friends, but the pressure from yourself to break your diet because it'd be easier, more convenient. So I would say that's the biggest challenge in my opinion.
And how did you find was the best way to deal with that?
I guess being consistent and remembering why you're doing the diet. I think the convenience of going off diet is tempting, but it's outweighed by the negative effects, and I think it sometimes takes some time to fully realize that when you're starting to go off on your own.
I think I can kind of speak about a period of time in my life that was the hardest, and Preston and I are on a panel later transitioning into college, and that was really the time period where I struggled the most. It's your first time being independent on your own. You really don't have control of your diet as much as you have in the past. If you're in a dorm setting, you don't have a lot of access to a stove, refrigerator, a lot of that. So you're eating in the dining hall, and unless your university is working with you, then you're going to the salad bar. So that was really the the hardest period of time. That was the biggest transition for me. And I worked with the dietitian at University of Georgia, and they were able to order my food for me. So that really opened a lot of doors and kind of made that transition a lot easier for me. So if you're interested in more of that, come to the teen topic later. But that was kind of the hardest time I've gone through.
My current hardest challenge with living with PKU right now is the volume of formula. I have close to 30 ounces of Phoenix 2 right now, and just sitting at home all day doing nothing, it's hard to get it all in, so I'm trying to find different options to lower that volume. I really like the GMP mix-ins, so little plug there. But I'm working with my dietitian to help lower that volume for the transition to college.
Our next question is, for someone who is struggling with managing their PKU, what kind of advice would you give them?
Go to camp. It is huge to have a support system. I started going to camp when I was in high school, and my family was awesome, but I did not have friends that had PKU. And I started going to camp my sophomore year of high school, and that was huge. And I have seen so many kids go through that camp, come in, and be struggling with their diet, and they all of a sudden have this huge support system of friends who are going through the exact same thing. And on those days where they want to go off diet or they don't want to drink their formula, they text their friend and like, gosh, I'm really not feeling PKU today, and they have someone to bounce ideas off of, and they have those friends that are going through the exact same thing. So if you're struggling, reach out and find friends that are going through the same thing that you are.
I would also say taking precautionary steps in your diet is huge. So, preparing meals in advance, keeping low-protein snacks on your person or in your car or whatever, so when you are presented with that opportunity to, break your diet, you have an option right there that's with you, and you don't have to worry about it as much. You don't have to think about it.
I'm going to kind of go off of your answer. I know when I was struggling to keep up with my diet and keeping records, I started a meal planning binder. I don't know if anyone's seen those, but I list out for the whole month some meals that are good, and right next to it I write the amount of fee or exchanges, and if someone ever asks, hey, what are you having for dinner, I can already just say, hey, it's right here. But also keeping a healthy communication with your dietitian is really important. I know she's helped me a lot.
And let me just chime in here as a parent of some children that have PKU, and I know there's a lot of family members here in the audience. Something that we're always wondering as a family support member for someone with PKU, what is helpful from a family perspective, and maybe more importantly, what's not helpful in your experience, either from siblings or, family or relatives?
What was super helpful for me is when I was growing up, my family never made me feel like I was any different. Like my meals, it's the meals that you really feel different at. And my plate looked exactly like my older two siblings and my parents, just the fact that I didn't have a protein on there, but I always had something extra that was special that took up that space. So I feel like my parents did an awesome job at really not making me feel any different in that way. One thing I know that, and I don't care, but that's just my personality, people will be eating a steak in front of me and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you can't have this. We don't care. Don't apologize.
One thing my parents often did was count fee out with me. So like when we'd go through what I was having for each meal, sort of recount what we've had so far that day. And it sort of it taught me how to take care of that and keep track of that myself without really being a hassle, because my parents were helping me through that process, and I kind of just learned, without even realizing it. So.
My mom would always sit down with me each night and write down what I had, go through the little blue book, really go through everything. So I would, even from a very, very young age, I would be used to the process. And once I turned 12, I pretty much took it all on my own. But not only my parents being helpful, I'm lucky enough to have other family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles that were always there for me, helping me make meals, getting meals, purchasing those expensive Cambrook foods. So it's great to have that family connection to really be with you.
We obviously have very good relationships, or try to have good relationships with our clinic staff, with our dietitians and our clinicians and our geneticists. So what would you tell folks is the best way that you found to maximize that relationship and to work with your clinic?
Well, I'm not the best example of this personally, but sending in your diet records regularly. So recently I had my fee sort of changed, my intake, and we kind of were speculating as to why it seemed like I could take in more fee. And I think it was because I wasn't sending my diet records in often enough and accurate enough. So my dietitian was, they take in, all the, I mean, you would speak to this better than I would, but they take in all of that information and compare it to what you've been eating and what your blood level looks like, and that gives the most accurate depiction of what you can eat. And the more often you do that, the more accurate that'll be, and it'll help you in the long run, knowing what you can have. So that's one example of why you should, because
Let me interrupt. How do you find is the easiest way for you to track what you're eating and track your fee? Do you use an app or the old paper pencil, or how do you do it?
Personally, if I have I kind of have a list in my head of foods that are okay to eat in moderation, and there's certain foods I'll keep track of if I know it's something you have to be limited in. But I stick to mainly low protein meals that I've been eating for years, and I kind of know what feeds in them anyway. So but when I was in high school, it was writing everything down per day and going through that with my parents, and it became second nature. But definitely writing fee amounts for everything.
It was kind of easy for me to stay in touch with my dietitian because I knew I wanted to be a dietitian, and so she kind of acted as a mentor for me as well. But don't be afraid to reach out with it. I know I have a very tight relationship with my dietitian, Anne Marie, but she always told me, I am available whenever. If you need to text me, if you need to email me, if you need to call me, I am your lifeline. If there's ever a point where you are struggling with the diet or you need someone to tell you it's going to be okay right then and there, like, she always made me feel comfortable to reach out to her. And so, like I said, me wanting to be a dietitian and her being that mentor for me, I think that really helped our relationship, obviously. But kind of as far as tracking goes, I'll say we're creatures of habit, and so I'm the same way. I eat pretty much the same things every day, and when you get to be an adult, that's just the easiest way to do it. You get up, you go to work, you have other things to do, and so I have a smoothie or avocado toast with low-fat bread in the morning. That's just my breakfast, and it really doesn't vary.
No need to write that down.
Yeah, exactly. But the How Much Fee app is amazing for tracking. I don't know how many of you guys use that. Back when we were little, that wasn't accessible, so I still have the Virgin issue book of how much fee and exchanges is and everything. So that was like the old school way of doing it, and sometimes I still do that because that's what I'm used to. And then I remember, oh yeah, I'm on my phone, I can pull it up right there. But yeah, it is super helpful to build that relationship with your dietitian if you are staying active and sending them diet records and sending them fee levels. it's easier for them to know what's going on, and you also feel a little bit more comfortable with them when you have that relationship of they're through the ups and downs with you.
I know having that connection with your dietitian is probably one of the most important things for me. I'm with Emory, and as those of us who are with Emory, the dietitians change constantly. So in a 3-year span, I probably went through at least 3 dietitians, which is not helpful. It's not giving you the stability you need. But I've been with Ashley Park for about 4 years now, maybe, as long as she's been there. And I've had a similar relationship as you have with yours. She's been amazing. But as far as tracking food goes, we are creatures of habit. I eat pretty much the same thing every week, every month. But whenever I do my blood spot, I do track at least 3 days on the How Much Feet app, because it really is helpful. Everything's on there. It would be helpful to have the database that the dietitians have access to, Metabolic Pro. That'd be nice, but it's not exactly available for us.
And let me maybe preview some of your breakout a little earlier, but I'd be curious, and I know a lot of the parents here, and maybe those of teenagers would be interested to know, at what age did you start taking over that communication with the dietitian? At what age did you start having that relationship more directly rather than with your parents?
I think it really started in high school. I'm looking at my mother. But like I said, I think it really helped me transition into that because I wanted to study dietetics, and so I'd reach out to her on my own, kind of asking for advice on dietetic programs and what to watch out for and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I don't know that I'm a good example of that because that's kind of a specific situation. But I saw a research poster, and I don't know who did it, but the transition from your parents taking over your care to you taking over your care, and that was so interesting. Awesome job. But I think that is really important because going to college, whether you have PKU or not, is hard. You're all of a sudden independent and having to sometimes do your laundry for the first time and sometimes do everything for the first time for yourself, clean, cook, all of that. So I think the earlier, and you, Preston had mentioned, like he counted feet with his parents, and I think that is a really great idea. The earlier you can get your kids involved in taking care of themselves and having that conversation with their dietitian and that relationship, it's even more helpful.
This is going to be a great breakout session, by the way, for those of you who have kids in this age range. Just putting a little plug. This is the theme of our new conference this year, by the way, is we're just giving you little teasers about all the great information in the breakouts for later, which I love. So our next question is, what do you think contributes to someone being successful at managing their PKU? And we're not really defining success to be anything particular, but just success in the general sense. And what have you found that helps someone be successful?
I think kind of going back to the precautionary measures I was talking about earlier, taking the steps that allow you to remain consistent in your diet. I think oftentimes, all of us at some point or another have kind of, ebbed and flowed with our diet, and you kind of go back and forth between having good levels and bad levels. And I would say that the best thing you can do is being consistent and taking the steps to allow yourself to be consistent.
So Georgia PKU Connect Camp gave me this really cool shirt that says PKU Own It. And I think that's huge because sometimes you just have to take ownership of your PKU and say, yeah, that's a part of me. It makes me cool and special and unique. And in today's world, that's really cool to be special and unique. So that, I think having the right attitude about it is huge. But I give all the praises to my family for my success. I really didn't have a choice. That was the way it was, and they told me that I needed to be on diet in order to have a healthy, happy brain, and so that sounded cool to me. So I really do. I can take a little bit of the success now that I'm an adult and deal with it on my own, but they started that, and they really planted the seed for the way I live my life now.
And I think the owning it aspect is really important, because ultimately, especially when you go off on your own with PKU, you're ultimately responsible for that. And as a parent, you can try to push the kid to take care of themselves, but they need to understand why they're doing it, and it's how it's for themselves and for their health. You can't, you can bring a horse to water, sort of, but that sort of idea. But with PKU, they have to understand personally.
To me, there are two major things to be successful with the PKU diet. One is to start as early as you can. That way, when you get to high school years, when you're transitioning into college or whatever you do after high school, you've already got it down. You're good to go. You don't have to be freaking out at the last minute. Oh my God, how do I do this? But starting early is really helpful. And also having the support of family to just kind of back you up. And I know my grandfather always told me, take care of yourself so you can take care of others. Work before play, pretty much. I mean, if you can't take care of yourself, how can you expect to live a successful life?
So I think a lot of times it's easy to focus on what may be the more difficult or more challenging aspects of having PKU. But I'd like to ask what you see as the positives. What's been a good thing about having PKU in your life?
I would say the biggest thing is that it does make me unique and special, and I always have something to talk about in a job interview or a personal essay, which is great. But the biggest thing, I am a dietitian because I have PKU. That was the start of my career. I had that awesome relationship with my dietitian, and she was such an integral part of my life. And so I saw, how she really took charge of the way I lived my life and took care of my diet, and I wanted to have that same relationship with other patients. And so that's the best thing for me, is that my career is centered around something that I just happen to be blessed with by genes. So I love having PKU, and it creates this awesome community that I would never even know if I didn't have it. And so I consider it just another added benefit in the back of my pocket.
I would say my overall outlook on health has been affected by PKU, and that we're always keeping track of what we're putting into our bodies. We're very conscious about it, and I think that carries on to other aspects of your life, not just food and how it relates to your PKU. It can really be just a sort of a segue into overall healthier eating, living, lifestyle, and being aware of that is, something that we're kind of required to have. So it makes it easier to keep track of that.
Well, you have something to contribute to that one paragraph of biology in class. But also, the health aspect is very nice, because you're going to carry that with you throughout your whole life. And it's not just the food that you eat, it's exercise and how it does relate to PKU, because you got to take that in consideration too. There's just so many positives. It's hard to list just one, but those are the top two.
A lot of the presentations here at the conference are about research and the future of PKU, and so I'd like to know what your hope is for the future with PKU.
It's amazing to see how far PKU has come just in my lifetime. when I was born, you had like 5 formula options, and low-pro foods were like rice, pasta, and bread, which is why I can't have a lot of these new things because I'm so used to those staples. But I try, and I like a lot. So just to see how far it has come, and I know just with the addition of Kuvan, I'm on Kuvan, and that opened my world up a lot, and I went on that when I went to college, so that was huge for me to maintain normal Phe levels while I was in college. So my hope really is that for those kiddos who struggle with the current treatments of diet and Kuvan and possibly PEG-PAL once they're 18, I really hope that no one feels burdened by PKU anymore.
Yeah, just to build off that, seeing how much it's progressed because of the PKU community and everybody putting into it, time, work. I hope that we just continue progressing how we have been. Because we kind of back to what the food staples were like when we were kids. We used to use a bread maker to make low-protein bread, which is a normal thing for a lot of people, I guess, but not recently. But yeah, just seeing we've progressed so much, and how much the formula I used to drink, I used to hate, but now I really enjoy it. That's a huge thing. Just as long as we can keep moving forward, I think that'd be great to see.
The different food products and formulas that are just coming to life, they're just getting better every time they come out. I don't know if anyone's tried the bread that's out in the exhibits.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Oh my God. It is really good. It has the consistency of angel food cake. It's the softest bread, low protein bread I've ever had. So, go check it out if you haven't already. But also the treatments, the upcoming treatments that we just saw yesterday on the panel. To see some of those come to life in the next 5 or 10 years would be a game changer easily. So those would be definitely helpful.
I think too. It was really cool for me to see that we have so many options and so many researchers interested in PKU. I was talking to my parents last night, and when we went to conferences when I was a little kid, no one was doing research, and it was all about how do we make the diet better. And the way we've progressed into having several different options is huge. And those researchers touched on the fact that not one is going to work for everyone. And so it's amazing to have different options because everyone is, just like every day, one thing doesn't work for everyone, isn't going to be the best for them. So I think that is so cool that so many things are on the horizon. It's an awesome time to be in the PKU community.
So we have a few minutes left for questions. If anyone had on any written down, we can gather them, or if you have a question you want to ask, raise your hand. Okay, so the question is, have you always been on diet? And then there's a follow-up, depending on your answer. So if you were off the diet, how did you feel, or how did it affect you? And then did you get back on, and how did you feel after coming back?
I'll start. It kind of depends on how you define off diet, because I've always eaten low-protein foods and always drank my formula, which I think is very important regardless of what you're eating. But I have, at certain points, eaten foods I'm not supposed to and have definitely felt the effects afterwards. Was the question how you felt? Or
Yeah, just how it affected you or how you felt?
I would say lethargy, anxiety, lack of impulse control. I think that was the biggest thing, because you kind of get caught in a circle. You start eating badly, and then it becomes easier to continue to eat badly. So once you kind of make a choice to go back, all of that clears up. I'm less tired, not worried so much. You can actually I think part of going on, maybe it's impulse control, maybe there's a mental aspect to that, maybe it's just habit and not breaking your diet because you're staying strong with it. But I would say there are definitely repercussions that make it not worth doing, and I've felt those.
So I've always been on diet, low pro foods, formula, the good works. I will say that I've had days where I wasn't a good planner, and especially in college, like I said, that was really the most challenging part of my life so far. So yeah, those days that I wasn't a super great planner, I'd be in class all day, and then my friends would text me and say, hey, let's go out to dinner, and I didn't have really an option to stay under that 40 exchange limit, or at that time I was kind of teetering. I had just started Kuvan, so I wasn't really sure what my prescription was at that time. So I went from 27 exchanges to kind of moving my way up. So that was kind of hard too. That was a hard thing to balance, trying to figure out how many exchanges I really could have while trying Kuvan and being in college for the first time and all that. So back to the original question, yes, I've always been on diet, but there are days that I find myself in situations where I wasn't a great planner, and I do go over a little bit. On those days, I can tell pretty immediately. I'd say within like 30 minutes, I have a headache, just feel foggy. So yeah.
I've always been on diet. Dr. Singh makes sure of that. But there are days, of course, when you splurge a little and you go have that pizza at a party, or right after your appointment, you go down to Fellini's. But you can definitely feel the effects. I know for me, I get headaches. I do feel groggy, and I get quite irritable. But other than that, it's pretty on diet, pretty standard, pretty routine.
Did we have other questions? Oh, there's Michelle right
Hi there. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. It's very inspirational. I'm a parent of two daughters that have PKU, and they're both in elementary school, and I know that, getting them to stay focused on things like homework and other things can be a challenge at times, but, sometimes you're not sure if that's around the PKU, or maybe it could be just around the fact that they're, elementary school kids. So I'm curious, as you've kind of gone through high school and college, did having PKU have any kind of influence around your ability to, let's say, stay focused, study, and some of the things that you did, to help manage and stay focused, stay on track as you went through your studies through high school and college?
I think obviously staying on diet is key to that. I don't remember any times other than just usual, especially in college. That was a huge difference from studying in high school. I don't know. I really don't remember having a hard time focusing, other than, like I said, I would be in class all day and then have 4 finals the next day, and I'd be in the library all night, and when you're up for 20 hours studying, you're obviously going to lack focus. That's just part of being in college and studying all the time. But I would say consistency on your diet is huge for that. I would say that's why maybe I've never had issues with that, because I have been on diet. Can you guys speak to that?
Yeah, I think one thing I noticed going back to high school, middle school, elementary school is that I didn't bring I always brought a lunch, low-protein food, had a low-protein breakfast, but I didn't bring my formula or shake or whatever you want to call it to school. So I was usually drinking it in the morning, and then when I got home, and then again later. So I've kind of found now when I went to college and onward from that, I drink it to feel my best, probably like 4 to 5 to 6 times a day, breaking it up to keep it more, in my body at more times of the day. And I realized I would have been in the same boat that a lot of kids feel uncomfortable drinking their formula at school, which is, I guess, something you can address, and every kid would be different. But I definitely felt that I think I would have felt better in high school had I brought my formula to school with me. but it wasn't debilitating, I would say. It just would have been a little better.
The first 2 years of high school, I was at a private school, so it was a pretty small setting. You pretty much knew everyone around you, so if someone asked you a question, you either answered it or told them to buzz off. I mean, I didn't really care what people thought of my formula at that point in my life. It was what it was, and I just had to deal with it. But later on in my high school years, I ended up going to cyber school, so I did everything from home and on my computer. So that was helpful. Everything's at your fingertips. You don't have to worry about anything, not having it with you. So that was convenient. Although I do remember in elementary school, it was very difficult to get the formula in. I remember being called back to the principal's office every day at certain times just so I could get it in throughout the day. But after a certain point, the principal didn't care, even with the severity of the diet. And these days, it's not their job to care. They just want you in, go through the core, and get you out. That's all they care about.
That's actually really, I had never thought of that. But like, I know a lot of kids that would go, put their insulin in at the nurse's office at whatever times of day. I had never thought about that as an option, but I wonder, working with the school, maybe just drinking your formula at the nurse's office kind of gets you out of the way of any social anxiety that might cause for the kid. Just a thought, something to consider.
Okay, so we're technically out of time, but we are going to go over because I have lots of questions coming up. So what I can say is y'all need to find the breakout session with these fabulous young adults. But we have one question in the audience we'll take, and then I have a couple questions here that are similar that I'll ask, and then we'll have to wrap up so we can get to our breakout. So go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your lived experience of PKU. For a parent of a child with PKU, I think that, and from speaking to parents from the last generation, we've become very analytical, and we've become very, even with advances in technology, anxiety seems to be at a much higher level for parents. And this is feeding onto children as well. Research has shown somewhat. Do you have advice for parents, particularly new parents? If you had one piece of advice to give us, what would that be?
That is tough because I haven't been in my parents' shoes, but I know what they did that worked really well for me. And the biggest thing was including, kind of what she said about, making a meal that looks like everybody else's meal, explaining to them how much fee they can have, counting it with them, making it very, ever present in their life where it becomes second nature, so that way when they get older, they have the tools to take care of themselves.
I would say disciplining your kids early on, teaching them right from wrong, it's going to help in the long run. I know my mom, at times, she wanted to pull her hair out, and I know I wasn't easy to deal with, but it gets better in time. Just keep that long-term goal in your head. It gets easier.
And another thing, I remember being at Disney World as a kid, and we were eating at a restaurant where nobody could eat. I couldn't eat anything, but my dad just pulled out a Tupperware container of low-protein pasta, put it on my plate. What are they going to do about it? Nothing. I think you could do that anywhere, really. Like, what are they going to do? Don't be afraid to make your own accommodations for your kid.
So the last question I'm going to ask, and again, feel free to go to the breakout session, and I'm sure our adults here would be happy if you came up to them and chatted during the rest of the conference. We have a couple questions here related to sports, and if you were engaged in any sports, and how you accommodated that with your diet, and how you worked sports in.
Preston will be the best example of this. But yeah, I played sports all my life. I love sports. I love to exercise. I still love to work out. I started dancing when I was 5 or 6 years old, and then I added on soccer, and then I added on tennis. So at one point, I was playing 3 sports in high school. I think with that, eating consistently throughout the day is huge. Working with your dietitian to make sure your kid is meeting their protein needs with their formula, getting enough calories, getting enough energy in order to get through their day and get through their sports. But there's no reason why you can't play sports or exercise or have the energy to do that. PKU should not limit your ability to do that. So yeah, work with your dietitian, and Preston is a great example.
So I ran in high school and I played rugby in college, and one thing I learned was in high school running a lot, always being hungry, and you're growing so much. Not that I grew that much, but the one thing that I found that helped a lot was eating a lot of vegetables. So I could be eating a bunch of pasta, breads, formula, and meeting my caloric requirements for the day, but I would still feel really hungry. And I think, that's when you start getting into like snack foods and then eating too much phi. But it was actually Dr. Singh that told me I need to just eat more vegetables. And normally that's not a problem for everybody with PKU, but especially the ones that are lower in phi, just really eating a ton of them helped me a lot.
I have a couple announcements I want to make to the group before we break up, but I want to give a big round of applause to our panelists this morning. And I just want to say, as a parent of kids with PKU, you all are the reason that I come to the conference, because you're the superstars and you're who we want to hear from, because we want our kids to turn out like you guys. So thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. So we have an amazing slate of breakout sessions through the rest of the day. We have a session beginning at 9:45, so you're going to have to hustle a little bit to get there because we ran over with this panel. And then we have another session immediately following that before lunch. Remember to get your kids from the kids zone for lunch, so everybody eats lunch. And then we have another breakout session after lunch. I do want to announce that tomorrow morning for breakfast, we are going to be down on the floor where the kids zone is. We're not in the ballroom across the hall. We're downstairs 2 floors. So try and keep that in mind when you wake up in the morning, because if you try and eat breakfast over there, you're going to be a little hungry. So, and with that, thank you and enjoy your breakout sessions.